Good morning and welcome to all of you joining us virtually for today's Bravo Dialogue, The Road to 1 Trillion Trees. I'm Maria Lourdes Teran, Vice President of the Council of the Americas offices in Miami. Welcome. Today, we're really honored to be hosting an incredible panel of global and regional sustainability leaders who will speak on the importance of conservation and the role that businesses play in protecting the environment. The experts joining us today are Tim Christophersen. Welcome, Tim. I saw you earlier. Vice President of Climate Action at Salesforce. Santiago Martinez Ochoa, Head of Sustainability and Decarbonization at Ecopetrol. Helena Pavese, Executive Manager of the Environment at Suzano. And the conversation will be moderated by Nicole Schwab, Director of 1T.org and Nature-Based Solutions and member of the Executive Committee at the World Economic Forum. So thank you so much, Nicole, for being with us. We know it's afternoon for you. Today's speakers represent the powerful collaboration leadership as it relates to climate action, and we are hopeful that today's session inspires you to take action and act as a multiplier for the conversations of forest conservation in Latin America. This conversation is part of our year-long Bravo Leadership Forums. These forums have become our signature engagement and dialogue platform for bringing together Latin America's business leaders to promote cross-country collaboration on key issues impacting the region. To conclude, I want to thank our 2023 Bravo sponsors, Bank of America, Jeffrey Group, the AES Corporation, Pfizer, Grupo Mariposa, Chubb Latin America, Fitch Ratings, MasterCard, Moody's Investor Services, and Salesforce, as well as our media partners, America's Quarterly, Bloomberg Linea, and CNN in Espanol. So again, thank you for joining us virtually. And Nicole, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Maria. I'm delighted to be with all of you today for this really important dialogue. And I want to start by sharing a few figures. We all know that forests are important. Forests are key to the health of the planet. They're key to our own health and our livelihoods. They sequester carbon, they regulate the temperature, they recharge groundwater, they anchor fertile soil, and they act as flood barriers. And they also harbor 80% of the world's terrestrial biodiversity. So really an absolutely critical ecosystem for all of us. Yet, despite all our efforts, we are still losing about 15 billion trees per year. And we know that deforestation and forest degradation are responsible for about 15% of the planet's greenhouse gas emissions and are a primary driver of species loss. The cost to business is increasingly evident. One of our studies at the World Economic Forum, we have estimated that more than half of the annual GDP, or $44 trillion, is potentially threatened by nature loss because business depends on nature and its services. So clearly a very important conversation. And that's why 3 years ago, we launched 1T.org, the World Economic Forum's Trillion Trees Initiative, to support the UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration with a particular focus on forest landscapes. So 1T.org serves a global movement to conserve, restore, and grow 1 trillion trees by 2030 and address some of the challenges that I have outlined just before. Now, the private sector has an absolutely fundamental role to play. There is a strong business case for investing in forests, and through partnerships with governments and with civil society, it is only through these partnerships and really this investment by all parties that we will be able to conserve and restore these critical landscapes. So at 1T.org, we build coalitions to raise ambition on forest action, and we highlight the best practices for high integrity and at-scale implementation. And there's been a lot of conversation around what that means, how to do it right. And we are here to support that process and bring in the expertise on that topic. Since our launch 3 years ago, more than 80 companies have pledged to conserve and restore over 7 billion trees in more than 65 countries. And with that, I'm delighted to now turn to our panelists, because all three companies represented today, Salesforce, Ecopetrol, and Suzano, have made a pledge to 1T.org. And I'm going to have an opportunity now to ask them and for you to hear from them. Why is this important? Why have they made these commitments? How is it part of their strategy? And what are some of the key lessons learned in that process? So let me turn to you first, Tim. Salesforce recently launched its Nature Positive strategy, one of the first companies that has publicly launched its Nature Positive strategy alongside its net zero commitment. Can you tell us a little bit more about the role of forest conservation and restoration in this strategy, and why this is so important for Salesforce and the business case around that?
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you also, Maria. First of all, thanks to the Council of the Americas for organizing this very timely get-together of chief sustainability officers and also this webinar. We probably have no more important region than Latin America when it comes to the global fight against deforestation, and also to turn the tide when we look at forest ecosystem restoration. The reason we've chosen that as our flagship nature investment, the investment in forests for our global nature positive strategy, is basically everything that Nicole just outlined. Forests are an ecosystem that are not only essential for the climate crisis, but that are essential for ensuring that we can halt and reverse nature loss. There's a new global agreement called the Global Biodiversity Framework that all countries agreed to in December 2022 in Montreal. That Global Biodiversity Framework now needs implementation at the national level. Our nature positive strategy comes as one business element and contribution to this. Of course, governments also have the key role to play here. Businesses can do a lot to promote nature positive business policies, production systems, and Salesforce plays an interesting role in this because we have so many contacts with the world's leading businesses. Most of the world's large companies that are Salesforce customers are now looking into nature as a material issue for their business. We estimate that about 60% of our customers have nature as a material issue for them, either because they're impacted by loss of nature through their supply chains, for example, or they have a material footprint on nature. And with that comes an increased responsibility now that we are all aware of the planetary intertwined crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, inequality, to turn the tide. We've chosen 1T.org because we've co-founded that 3 years ago with the World Economic Forum, and because forest ecosystems are really the essential ecosystem where we can make the fastest difference in the shortest time. If you would imagine that deforestation was a country, it would be the world's third largest emitter. So this is a very, very clear and fast action that we all can take that has multiple other wins for humanity if we stop deforestation and then turn the tide by investing in forest ecosystem restoration. And just to close on two of the flagship projects in Latin America that we are supporting under 1T.org. They are both actually UN Decade World Restoration flagships. One is the restoration of the Atlantic rainforest across the coast of Brazil and parts of Paraguay and Argentina. The other is called Acción Andina, a reforestation of the high Andes that now spans 7 countries. There's now over 20,000 people and over 100 communities involved to restore forests at over 400 sites. And that is important because all of the water that is captured by these cloud forests is then stored in high Andean wetlands, and that trickles down as clean and purified drinking water to a lot of the cities in Latin America. As the glaciers retreat with climate change, that kind of water supply, including for cities like Lima, will be more and more essential. So we have to restore these forests and see them as critical infrastructure for our civilization. This is not a nice to have project that we embark on because it's corporate social responsibility. No, these are critical infrastructure investments of our time. So with that, back to you, Nicole.
Thank you, Tim. I think that what you just ended on is so critical in terms of the business case and what are we talking about here. So with that, I would like to turn to you, Helena. Suzano also has done quite a lot in terms of conservation and restoration of forest ecosystems. Can you tell us why Suzano is investing beyond its value chain activities and what the company is doing in that space?
Of course. First of all, thanks for the opportunity to be here with such a selected group and have the opportunity to share Suzano's ambitious commitments and goals towards conserving nature. For you that are not aware or familiar with us, we are a global market leader for eucalyptus pulp, and we supply to over 100 countries, but our headquarters and most of our operations are based here in Brazil. And as our core business are trees, protecting and conserving nature is at the heart of our company. There's a lot of work that we've done to protect nature since we were built and established 99 years ago. But today I just wanted to share with you some great examples of the work we do in terms of protecting, restoring, and connecting nature. In terms of protecting, we hold and manage 1 million hectares of native forest for the single purpose of protecting and conserving. Just for you to have an idea, this is the size of 9 Hong Kongs. And these are located in biomes of national and international relevance, like the Amazon forest, the Cerrado, and the Atlantic forest. In terms of restoring, we understand that only protecting won't solve our biodiversity challenge. We also need to restore the amazing size of lands that we have of degraded lands. So currently, Suzano holds and restores 36,000 hectares of areas that are degraded by pasture of other reasons and will become forests again. And finally, I'm really proud to share with you our ambitious commitment towards connecting life, what we call commitment to renewing life. Suzano has made an ambitious commitment to connect by 2030 500,000 hectares of priority areas for biodiversity conservation. And we're going to do this by establishing biodiverse corridors at a landscape scale in 3 biomes that I just mentioned before. So in addition to that, we are also working with relevant stakeholders, including governments, to establish networks of protected areas. And we also work with local communities, producers, landowners to establish business models that can generate shared value while conserving nature. So as you can imagine, the challenge to implement all this work are huge. And for that, we believe and rely on the power of partnerships. All the work I've mentioned before, it's being done through partnership with local, national, and international stakeholders from a variety of sectors, including academia, NGOs, governments, and all the different organizations. So to finalize, I just wanted to share with you our strategic partnerships that we are really proud of. You might have heard about it because we launched it last year at the COP27, and it's called Biomas. It's a startup company established by Suzano in partnership with 5 other major companies with the single goal of conserving nature. Biomas will restore and protect in the next 20 years 4 million hectares of native forest. This, for you to have an idea, is the area of Switzerland. And this is going to be divided this way. 2 million hectares will be restored by planting around 2 billion native trees. And the other 2 million are native areas that are going to be set aside for the single purpose of protecting and conserving nature. So this is our commitment towards protecting and conserving our ecosystems in Brazil, but with a contribution worldwide.
Thank you, Helena. It's very impressive to hear of that commitment and the scale, where we also need the expertise of companies like yours in order to really understand how do we reach that kind of scale. So let me turn now to you, Santiago. Ecopetrol has set ambitious climate and biodiversity targets. And can you tell us a little bit more how nature-based solutions contribute to those targets, and particularly forest ecosystems?
No, absolutely. And again, first of all, let me thank you all. I'm delighted to be here and to be sharing this space with such a select panel. Well, nature-based solutions in Ecopetrol are really at the intersection of our climate and biodiversity agendas. As you may already know, Ecopetrol has made a series of public commitments around emission reductions, and we have certain targets for 2030 and 2050. And even though our main efforts on the decarbonization front are focused on diversifying the portfolio in the medium and long term, and in reducing emissions as cost effectively as possible with projects such as energy efficiency, reduction of flaring, methane, renewable energies, and the like, we need to find a way to deal also with residual hard to abate emissions. And that's where natural climate solutions come into play. We already have entered into a series of partnerships for the past years with credible organizations, and these projects are meant to develop restoration of wetlands, forest, reforestation activities, avoided deforestation activities as well. We're also prioritizing agroforestry and silvopastourism projects. If we take into account the context of Colombia, this is quite relevant, and I think it was mentioned before. Around 60% of the country's emissions are related to both deforestation and land use changes. That means that we need to act and that we really need meaningful projects at scale. Even though we're aiming to capture by 2030 at least 4 million tons of CO2 through this portfolio, these projects are not just about carbon. They're about delivering as well positive outcomes on communities, local ecosystems. Probably one good example of this is a project that has been going on for the past 10 years, which is called the Project Wildlife, which is carried out with a partnership with OECS and local LGOs, and is meant to protect 15 species in prioritized ecosystems: the Andean and Amazon region, the Orinoco, and the Middle Magdalena Valley. And for the past decade, it really has shown positive outcomes in, for example, related to lower deforestation rates in the areas of influence of the project. It has increased the connectivity in those areas, increased the population of target species, and it has provided clear incentive for communities that directly improve their quality of life. So it's really an integrated strategy that takes into account not just climate, but biodiversity and social components as well. And it fits very well with the 1 Trillion Trees initiative, because I think it has also that holistic view. It's not just about trees, it's much more than that. It really involves communities, restoration, and a holistic view that is required for these sort of projects.
Thank you very much, Santiago. Indeed, I think, and just like Tim said, I mean, we are here at the heart of climate, biodiversity, but of course also with the social component of engaging the communities and local livelihoods. So now that we've heard from the three of you on a little bit about what you're doing, what's the business case, how is your company thinking about that, I'd like to ask you now questions that are related more to some of the challenges that you encountered, because of course we know that forest ecosystems are very complex, that forest conservation and restoration is a complex endeavor with lots of different variables. And so I'd like to unpack that a little bit for our audience. So let me start with you, Helena. One of the questions that we hear often is, how do we get buy-in on this business case, on investing beyond core business activities? So can you tell us a little bit about how you mainstreamed this issue across the organization and how you got the buy-in from top leadership on these very ambitious programs that you outlined earlier?
Sure, Nicole. So as I mentioned, we work with trees, and therefore our business model needs a balanced ecosystem to thrive, to survive. We already feel the impacts of climate change, of water scarcity, of land degradation in our business and in our operations. But we can also clearly see the positive impact we create in the environment when we work with those areas I mentioned to protect, to restore, to connect our ecosystems. We can also see the benefits to our business and to society when we establish partnerships, when we improve communities and landowners that surround our operations. So all the above challenges and benefits are very clear to our leadership. They are part of our day-to-day business discussions and decisions, and therefore mainstreaming forest protection and restoration in our business was a natural thing to do. Without that, we know that our business would not thrive, would not survive. So I have shared with you a long-term goal that we established, a commitment which was to connect 500,000 hectares of key biomes in Brazil, but we also have several other very ambitious long-term goals that I invite you to get familiar with through our website. But just to give you some examples, we aim to remove 40 million tons of carbon from the atmosphere by 2025, also to reduce 15% of our water use by 2030. So these and many other long-term goals that we established were done in a process of several hands, a result of a collaboration involving all the areas of the company and also external consultation with key stakeholders. So they are fully mainstream in our company leadership. And they are so mainstream that most of our leaders have an ESG target as part of their individual performance goal. So at Suzano, we are all guided from the bottom to the top. All levels of the companies are guided by the premise that it's only good for us if it's good for the world. After all, we know that everything is interrelated. We are all interdependent, people, business, nature. So as you can see, our commitment to nature protection goes beyond our border, and it's totally mainstream in our leadership. And these goals that we established and our leadership committed to were not set because we aim to comply with legislation and certification. That's something that we already do. They were established voluntarily by our leadership and the whole company because we are truly committed to making a meaningful contribution to address our environmental crisis and protect our planet for ours and for next generation. So this is a legacy that Suzano wants to leave for Brazil, but also for the world. And our leadership is fully committed to that.
Thank you, Helena. I very much like this example of making these targets actually individual, right? And really having ownership of, and this topic you mentioned before, responsibility as well. So Tim, let me turn to you. And I think Salesforce is quite unique in that it's not only looking at its own business operation, but also at how it can get its customers to think about their dependencies and impact materiality on nature. As you were developing your nature positive strategy at Salesforce, what were some of the biggest challenges that you had to overcome? And what were some of the lessons that you learned in this process that could be helpful for other companies who are engaging on that journey?
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. So our Nature Positive strategy launched last month on the 5th of April. It's online and has 3 pillars. The first is that we assess our own nature footprint and want to share that information publicly. The second is that we want to help lead global restoration at scale through 1T.org with 82 other companies and hopefully many more soon. And the third is that we want to accelerate our customers' journey to the nature targets under the Global Biodiversity Framework to the nature positive journey. The difficulties in this are at the same time also opportunities. So first of all, while we're building this strategy, some of the global framework, both the scientific and the policy frameworks, are still being established. We piloted the Task Force on Nature-related Financial Disclosures and provided them feedback in the process. And instead of waiting with launching our strategy until everything was settled, we made it part of our strategy to help ensure that the Science-Based Target Network and their nature targets, TNFD, that they benefit from our early experience, and we help to improve that guidance. In Europe, for example, the European Sustainability Reporting Standards are only being finalized as we speak. And all of that is slightly still in the making, but we know enough to set the outlines of an ambitious strategy. And here comes the opportunity for Salesforce. We need to simplify this for customers because it's quite an alphabet soup that we concocted there in Montreal at COP15 and under the Global Biodiversity Framework. And you know that emission reductions and measuring emissions, that's complicated enough. Biodiversity is even more complicated because it's so highly localized. It is a very complex issue. With our technology, we want to make it easier for companies to enter this space, to at least have an entry point where you can have a quick assessment that gives you first indications of where to focus. So for us, that challenge, that it's very complex, was also an opportunity. And another challenge I want to point out is quality of projects, both in the voluntary carbon market for nature-based solutions, where we're a large investor. We're actively looking right now, for example, to fulfill part of our strategy commitment of buying 1 million tons of blue carbon. So we're actively looking for mangrove projects. But the quality that we see is not yet sufficient for the scale we need. So we also need to invest in project pipeline in very high quality, very meticulously monitored and verified projects. So that quality is something we all need to work on together, but there's a lot of progress on that front. And through networks like 1T.org, we can share experiences with the other corporate alliance members. We can work together to ensure that we have the latest information available, the best possible guidance to move forward, because it's a complicated field, but we have to invest. There's no other option right now because of the state of the planetary crisis that we're in. So there's no other option but to invest, and we have to do it in the best possible way. And that means collaborating and sharing knowledge and resources.
Thank you, Tim. And I think that's a great segue to you, Santiago, because I think the scrutiny around voluntary carbon markets is on everyone's minds at the moment. And yet we know that when done right, forest carbon credits have the potential to deliver very important social and environmental benefits and finance to local communities. So I'd like to ask you, because you mentioned it also previously in terms of your strategy, how are you addressing some of the risks around the quality, around a lot of what we've been hearing in terms of the criticisms of the voluntary carbon markets? And what would you say to the companies who are on the fence and who are not quite sure if they want to invest in forest carbon credits?
No, absolutely. And thank you for the question, because I think it's critical at the moment. I think Tim mentioned a key word, which is quality. We need to ensure the quality of both the projects and the credits that are being produced as a result of the projects. And this is a market that is still maturing. And that doesn't mean that you should not invest in this sort of projects, because we need to act now. Of course, you also need to mitigate certain risks. So I would say the first thing is you need to establish partnerships with credible entities, with credible partners. That's step one. We did a market analysis a few years back, really understanding who we were going to enter into a partnership with, to make sure that they had the right skills, that they knew the territories where they were working, that they knew the local communities. The second point is we also started developing internal guidelines, because Ecopetrol has many subsidiaries, many companies that also want to be involved in this space, but we want to make sure that we do it in a transparent and robust way. So there has to be some sort of internal guidelines that take into account what is being developed by the voluntary carbon market initiative and other sort of initiatives that really strive to make this, again, a credible market. We are also doing internal due diligence. For one, when we develop our own projects, there's a series of steps that we take to ensure that a minimum criteria is met, but also when we acquire credits, because we're also not only developing projects, we are establishing a trading desk. And the trading desk needs to follow the same criteria, the same standards when we acquire those credits. Another key point is we're investing a lot in research and development. So we have a research institute in Ecopetrol, and we're placing, for example, Ericovaris towers in different ecosystems in Colombia to measure the carbon dynamics in specific ecosystems in Colombia, so that we can develop both protocols and methodologies that are tailored to those ecosystems, to make sure that we are not over promising on these projects. Very important is that all of this information is being made public and is meant to strengthen also the institutional capacities of the entities in Colombia that are responsible for establishing the national baselines, to make sure that, again, when you generate these credits, the baselines have the right information behind them. And finally, is making sure that you are utilizing credible standards along the way from the beginning of these projects, to make sure that you're not running into any reputational risks, but also to make sure that you are creating positive outcomes, not just for the ecosystems, for the atmosphere, but for local communities as well. And regarding local communities, this is something that is a key topic in Colombia right now, to make sure that you have equitable benefit sharing. And it's a term that everyone talks about. What does that mean? And we're in the process of making sure that, again, in our projects, the bulk of the benefits are distributed to the communities.
Thank you, Santiago. And I think your point that we have to act now, we can't wait until everything is perfect, because we know this is also maturing. I think you illustrate that very well, and that there is something we can do not only to bring to the development, also, as you said, Tim, right, companies also have a role to play in helping as we increase the quality, increase the integrity, bring the R&D, and then work to identify in each ecosystem, what does that mean? So I think that's a really great example of what a company can do. So we have time for a final round of questions, and I'd like to ask you a little bit about the role of partnerships. And as Tim said, with 1T.org, we have a corporate alliance where we help, kind of facilitate some of the knowledge sharing that some of the points that you have raised today. But maybe you can say a little bit, each one of you, on the role of partnerships, and also maybe a success story that you'd like to share from your journey in investing in forest conservation and restoration. And perhaps, Helena, let me start with you again.
Thanks. So, as I said, partnerships is critical for everything we do. And the beauty of partnerships is this: bringing people and institutions together that share common goals and objectives to work together to address significant goals that we cannot tackle alone. So by being together, we boost our motivation, but we also share best practices, experience, technology, information. We can help each other, and we can join our forces to address those challenges. So international, national, local partnerships are critical. And at Suzano, as I said, everything we do with partners. So since the bottom level work in the field, planting forests, finding local solutions, this is done with the local producers, landowners, local communities, through consultation, dialogue, and finding solutions together. But also global challenges like climate change that require not only local solutions, but also international solutions. So we partner with companies like these ones that are here, and many others, and also different stakeholders, to work together to address those challenges. So as I said, there's no way we can address the environmental challenge alone. We need to work together. And this is why we are here. This is why we've joined the initiative and all these ambitious goals, because we believe on this joint effort. And in terms of a great, successful case, I think we're proud of everything we do, because they are all very ambitious goals. As I said, they are landscape goals. And once we implement, imagine we're building a corridor of 500,000 hectares, and we are crossing Brazil with this corridor. Brazil is a continental country, it's huge. So once we implement these corridors, think about the contribution we are making, not just for the local communities that are going to have, a balanced ecosystem to survive, but also business and also the global community. So we're really proud of these commitments we're making, and we're working really hard to achieve them. Also, the initiative I mentioned, bringing together 5 major companies to restore and protect 4 million hectares of land. So Brazil is a really green country, and we're making it greener by all these initiatives we're making. And it's not just these large-scale initiatives that we're proud of. We are proud also of the small initiatives, but that change local communities and people's lives. So we have several of them at a small scale, but this is small for us. But for the people that are on the ground, this makes all the difference. So all the work we do, social, environmental work we do, it makes a change in different levels, and we're very proud of all the work we've been doing since we were established 99 years ago.
Thank you, Helena, and yeah, really, really inspiring to hear. Santiago, a few words about partnerships and a success story.
No, I fully agree with Helena. Everything that we do in Ecopetrol around these topics is done through partnerships. So there are an essential element to really being able to deploy quality projects. I started with it's one of the examples that we are really proud of, which is a project like Wildlife, and that's done in partnership with the Wildlife Conservation Society. It's been a partnership that has lasted already for more than 10 years. And I think that also shows the success of the project behind it, because you really need to devote not just resources, but time in building that trust, not just with a partner, but with the community. You're really investing in communities for the long term. We have other partnerships, for example, with Fundación Natura and Fondo Acción. These are local NGOs that share our views, that have a common goal with us. So it's really it's not a profit that is moving the projects, but it's really a common vision and a common goal towards delivering positive results in these territories. So again, partnerships, I think, critical. You need to be able to invest again. Long-term view, long-term relationships in order to really see the results at the end of the day.
Thank you, Santiago, and to you, Tim, for the final words on before I close on maybe some success story from Salesforce and something you want to say about partnerships.
Well, Salesforce has more than 150,000 customers globally. These are other companies that we work with, and that in itself is a huge partnership network that we would like to engage and mobilize much more for climate action. And sharing everything we do and our lessons learned is key to that. As Nicole knows, I'm fairly new to the private sector. I joined last year. I was with the United Nations for the last 15 years. What I find fascinating, building on Helena's point, we need to move from a situation right now as a global civilization where we're an uncoordinated group of football players, where it's not really clear who's responsible for what, to making sure everybody steps up their game. We have to coordinate, governments have to step up, companies have to step up, civil society has to do their part. So there's no more of that blame game going around. We all move towards the 1.5 degree target and the equivalent nature target, which is halting and reversing nature loss by 2030. And everybody plays their part. For that, of course, partnerships are absolutely essential. One of my favorite projects, and again, it's also part of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, is Acción Andina. I mentioned it has now 7 Andean countries. These are above 4,000-meter forest restoration projects done by volunteers in high mountain villages, and it's now such a social grassroots movement that it's almost unstoppable, and it's replicating and scaling up very fast, which shows that when we have solutions that people can participate in and local communities can embrace, and that have government backing, that have financing from the private sector, that's a winning combination, and that can generate the scale of the response we now need.
Thank you, Tim. It has been really fascinating to listen to all of you. I think as key takeaways, we heard clearly that, first of all, nature is a material issue for business. and that just like we're focusing on climate action, we need to focus on biodiversity, and forest ecosystems lie at the heart of that. We also heard from you how you can leverage, and there is a business case to work not just in your core business actions, but beyond, and beyond either, you know, what you shared from Suzano or Ecopetrol or with Salesforce, by actually inspiring your customers to also go down that journey. So there are so many possibilities of how the private sector can leverage its influence, its resources, its know-how, its expertise to really address these dual crises that we're facing. I think we've also heard it very interestingly that the challenges in this complex environment can become opportunities, that we need to act now. We can't wait until everything is perfect, and that we can help to improve the quality, improve the integrity, improve the standards as we go along on this journey together. As you said, Tim, as a more coordinated team of players. And then finally, the role of partnerships. And with that, I'd like to end with a call to action. With 1T.org, we're really here to help everything that we've talked about, to raise the ambition, to raise the scale, to raise the quality, to showcase what is high quality and how can a company go down that journey from making the business case all the way to selecting the partners and to implementation, whether it's through the voluntary carbon markets, whether it's through, you know, another route, a nature positive strategy. So I'd like to invite all of you to make a pledge to 1T.org and to join our corporate alliance, and we'll be delighted to work with you and your companies to see how we can support that process. And so with that, I'd like to thank our online audience for joining us today, and to thank our very inspiring panelists for your contributions. Thank you very much.